Please stop, man. Just no. Ugh. So, one of my biggest problems with very popular romance webtoons is how many of these portray toxic romantic relationships. Showing toxic relationships alone isn't a problem, just look at how BoJack Horseman shows the devastating impact of toxic behaviour in relationships. However, many popular webtoons show toxic characteristics as something light-hearted, cute, and even downright desirable. In the end, people may argue that fiction is just fiction and that readers should be able to dissociate themselves from what is essentially made up. However, we have to consider the fact that A. Romance webtoons target younger, more impressionable audiences, and B. That many of these webtoons are designed with characters as self-inserts to help with the reader immersion and enjoyment. Let's look at a few examples. The most frustrating thing to me, both in real life and when reading works of fiction, are characters that simply don't understand that no means no. Far too many times have I seen characters that incessantly pursue the main character, or vice versa. While the author portrays this kind of game of tag as cute or funny, that doesn't sound like romance. That sounds like Slenderman. If you think about it, it really isn't romantic. Not understanding boundaries and when to back off is a serious red flag in any relationship, let alone a romantic one.
Why are you running?
I don't think this kind of behaviour should be represented by a character who's supposed to be reasonably popular and amicable. Or in Let's Play, like, who walks up to their new neighbour and whispers in their ear like this? Or how about this guy who takes this picture in front of the girl's dad and sister and then makes fun of her after seeing her for the first time in a decade? I could not tell you what's going on. In Beware the Villainous, one of the key romantic interests are portrayed as literal perfection, Michelangelo's David, and acts like a pet puppy. Oh wait, yeah, of course he's half dog. The main character is practically perfect by all means, while her potential suitors have the IQ of a child and no other emotion than to worship her. This is similar to many other webtoons, some worse than others, such as Down to Earth, where the love interest is a very cool, attractive alien and so on, but is attracted to a very useless main character for no reason other than for reader self-inserting. Furthermore, both of these examples fall into the born sexy yesterday trope, in which a very naive, innocent personality is paired with a much more mature physical frame. This trope in and of itself is incredibly creepy and has very disturbing underlying implications because of the implied vulnerability and power imbalance. You might initially ask, what's wrong with that? It's just harmless fiction, who doesn't dream about a perfect partner? But what this kind of representation results in is an extremely unhealthy expectation of real-life relationships. During their first romantic relationship, people come to understand the shortcomings that their partner have that they might not have been initially aware of. Maybe they're a little too secretive, perhaps a little insecure, or maybe they murder people. Point being, it's essential to understand that everyone has their downsides and that no one is perfect. Aside from the bad influence on impressionable teens, it's also paired with the fact that this kind of writing just makes for a very boring, one-dimensional story where the characters simply don't have any depth. This contrasts heavily with examples that flip this trope on its head, such as Reunion and Villainous Turns the Hourglass, both of which have more than one-dimensional characters and also happen to have phenomenal artwork to go along with it. This is usually the emotionally stunted love interest who is often a male and very affluent. Secretary Out of Order has a very possessive male love interest who of course happens to have a sweet spot for the main character. The main dynamic between them is that they're a company CEO and secretary. She's an orphan and he's rich. However, it's absolutely hilarious when you look at the actual romantic attraction between the two. The main character has no real reason to like this guy other than his money, looks, and emotional maturity of a fetus. Is that really the message? I don't think I've ever seen any fictional work that straight up idolises certain extreme toxic characteristics, but I've seen far too many which show the love interests making up for their toxicity by some acting nice once or twice. Yes, this character is somewhat developing, but simultaneously it's nevertheless toxic as a sort of hurt and rescue mentality. He straight up refuses to let her leave her toxic workplace. Romantic. This really suggests to the audience, oh, you can mistreat your significant others, just do something really nice for them afterwards and it'll be okay. That's really not how it should work. Oh, he also happens to treat her like a literal child. Add that one to the list. True Beauty initially starts off as if it's going to critique the superficial nature of dating and modern society, as a conventionally unattractive main character somewhat changes her outward identity. But then that plot goes down the drain and becomes a generic romance. Sounds familiar. Just everything about the romance in this webtoon. Well, it may not be as bad as this garbage, it's pretty high up there on the trashy ladder. Aside from the mildly cringeworthy writing, I mean, who speaks like this? My biggest issues concerning Let's Play's romantic subplots are, well, egregious white knighting, complete lack of boundaries intruding upon personal finances without being asked to, intentionally pushing comfort lies in order to help them learn to say no, nepotism, trying to convince someone with words into dating someone, saviour syndrome, leading people on, verbosely esoteric creepiness, and assault.